His complexion was even darker than the previous two visitors, and he also looked oriental. His hands were especially unusual, with unduly long tapering fingers. He wore a cheap-looking, ill-fitting suit, and his tie was knotted in an odd-fashioned way. He did not wear an overcoat, despite the fierce cold outside. He spoke in a peculiar stammering monotone and argued with Mrs. Heyer about UFOs. He soon left and later visited the home of several local witnesses. Men in Black and the Mothman. The first encounter of the Mothman took place on November 15, 1966, by David and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Millette. The two couples were traveling late at night in the Scarberry car. They passed the West Virginia Ordnance Works, an old abandoned World War II TNT factory. They noticed two red lights in the shadows by an old generator plant. After stopping the car, they realized the lights were the glowing eyes of a large creature, shaped like a man, but bigger, maybe 6.5 or 7 feet tall, with big wings folded against its back, according to Roger Scarberry. The couples were terrified. They fled and reported what they saw to the police. They were not the only ones who encountered this creature. On the 16th, Mr. and Mrs. Raymond Walmsley and Mrs. Marcella Bennett were going to see some friends who lived near the TNT plant. When Mrs. Bennett got out of the car, she realized there was a figure lurking behind them. It seemed like it had been lying down, slowly rising up from the ground, large and gray, with glowing red eyes. Mrs. Walmsley ran inside and phoned the police as the creature walked onto the porch and peered in at the couples through the window. The entity fled before the police arrived. During these strange encounters, something terrible happened to the town of Point Pleasant. On December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge, which connected Point Pleasant to Ohio, collapsed. It plummeted to the depths of the river, killing 46 people. The event was heavily investigated, and the only consensus of the collapse was a small manufacturing flaw in the single-eye bar suspension chain. The believers in the Mothman sightings would say that the two events are connected. Witnesses and believers even claim that the Mothman appears before upcoming disasters. Between 1966 and 1977, there were over 100 eyewitness encounters with the creature. Jeff Walmsley was among the few people willing to discuss his personal knowledge of the events. Mr. Walmsley has lived in actually live in nearby Gallipolis, Ohio. Now, I was born and raised in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, right down the street from where those original witnesses lived back in 1966, said Walmsley. I grew up hearing about the Mothman sightings. I was always interested in the story because it took place literally in my hometown. I was lucky enough to launch 2 book projects that contained exclusive interviews with many of those original witnesses. I have collected archives for years and run the world's only Mothman museum. I ran my own chain of record stores for about 15 years. Mr. Walmsley now teaches graphic design in Point Pleasant at the Career Center and High School. But the Mothman was only one of the mysterious things that occurred in Point Pleasant during this time. UFOs were often reported, including eerie encounters with the MIB, Men in Black. The Grinning Man, as many refer to him, was supposedly in Point Pleasant as well. The best-known Grinning Man was Indrid Cold, who appeared during the Mothman sightings. The first encounter was on November 2 of 1966. A man by the name of Woodrow Durenberger was driving home after work when he heard a sudden crash behind him. A strange vehicle shaped like an old furnace firing soot and embers at both ends sped by him and stopped, blocking off the road ahead. A tall, thin man stepped out of the car and approached Mr. Durenberger. He approached with a broad grin on his face and said his name was Indrid Cold. The two men had a brief conversation about the Mothman sightings, and then Mr. Cold left. There were a number of other encounters with a Mr. Indrid Cold after this night. All descriptions matched, but no explanations. Jeff Walmsley briefly mentioned such strange things that he remembered during his childhood. The UFOs were here before the Mothman stuff started occurring. The MIB were here asking witnesses and others a lot of questions. Some witnesses were too scared to talk to anyone about what they saw. So there have been other strange occurrences in Point Pleasant. Actually, the Mothman sightings are just a small part of all that was going on here. It seems that while Point Pleasant is known only for the story of the Mothman, there is obviously much more to uncover in this small town.
Tomorrow, we will cover in the cold and the end at being Point Pleasant. I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
What's the most paranormal thing that has ever happened to you? This is a pretty spooky thing that happened to me. B20, doing acid, peak at around 12, fast forward to about 3:30 AM, coming down, not really hallucinating as much, sitting outside smoking a cig with GF and dog. GF goes inside to make some cookies for us, just sitting outside. On porch with dog in silence, live next to a busy road, so usually there's at least a few cars regardless of time of day. For about 20 minutes it's just complete silence, no wind, no cars, no random animal noises anywhere. Notice this and get a little uncomfortable, blame it on the drugs and just keep smoking and relaxing. All of a sudden hear an extremely loud 6-second inhale, hear a loud noise that I can't describe. It sounded like part human part coyote, but it was a lot deeper than either usually sound, and it sounded distorted. Just hear this snarl half laugh. Dog shoots up and immediately starts shaking violently. Dog usually runs and barks at any noise in existence, but this time dog stands up and shakes. I grab dog and sprint inside. Be me, 20-year-old singer in a band, had a gig in my local pub, finished for the night, around 12 to 1. Hadn't drank that night, house was only 4 minutes away, decided to walk, said goodbye to my friends, started walking alone. To get to my house, had to go down a street my parents claimed was haunted. Skeptic me thought it was bullshit. Walking, humming a song in the dead of night, barely any noise. Felt something latch onto my back. Could feel hands around my neck and chests. Whatever it was strong, but light enough. I sprinted home with it clawing and pulling me. Screaming like a girl a whole way home. Fucking terrified. Bust into my house. I'm freaking out still, and my parents come in. Whatever it was no longer there. Could still feel where it grabbed me. Tried to explain to my parents, but was too terrified. Slept with the light on that night. To this day I still have no idea what it was, or what the fuck happened. Never walked home alone again. I fell through the ground once. I was walking in my house and I just kind of fell. I felt the rush of falling and all of a sudden I was in the floor. No damage, nothing. I have no idea what happened, but I had to tear up the kitchen to get myself out. Nobody believes me and thinks I'm a schizo or something, but I swear to God I just fell into it. Fucking hacker. This is what happens when you try to knock clip on an official server. Smoke alarm won't stop going off when I cook. Has a 10-year battery built in. Read about some guy who had a similar issue with his alarm clock. Get an idea. Find out the battery will stop working when exposed to humidity. Put it in the shower for 6 hours. Find out that it makes a loud shrieking sound when the battery dies. Stab it repeatedly with a knife. Repeatedly slam it on the ground. Beat it with my fists. Stab the back of it with a screwdriver as that's what actually disables it. Maintenance replaces it for free. Speech_100.jpg. New smoke alarm. Same brand. Same issues. Pull out a knife as I go to turn it off. MFW. It shuts up. MFW it still shuts up. Be me. Go hunting in the Shenandoah with my dad and cousin. Hunting see something that looks like a bear. Human. and goat combined. Starts rushing at us, get a few rounds off at it on my SKS. It continues to rush, jump into the back of my dad's truck, and we haul ass. It starts to gain on us, empty more rounds from my SKS into its skull. The thing trips on a branch and we are able to get the hell out of Dodge. This was a year ago. Me, 16, playing Melee with my other cousin. Same age. We are home alone for 2 weeks because of reasons. Day 4 into paradise, then suddenly it sounds like someone is beating the bedroom door down like a motherfucker. Asterisk BLAM 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 asterisk double fisted door punches for 10 seconds straight. UHH anyone there silence. Kept playing Melee and nothing happened again ever. Microwave didn't stop beeping. I unplug it, still beep for like 5 minutes, before turning off. Is this paranormal? I got one. When I was a little kid, my family would sometimes go to visit my grandma, and by extension lots of extended family, since most of them live in the same town. My rich ass uncle bought the house for my grandma. It was an old bed and breakfast kind of house, 2 stories, and it was from the early 1900s or late 1800s or some shit. The front door opened up into a long hallway, and on the right side of the hallway was a staircase to where the guest rooms were. Going by that staircase always gave me the fucking creeps. When I was about 6 or 7, my grandma died. Around that time I had a dream that my dad was in the upstairs section, which I had never seen before. My dad was running away from a demon-like being that had a black shadowy body, a white skull face, and shadow-like spiky protrusions coming from its head. The demon jumped on my dad's back, and my dad said, help me anon. But I was frozen in fear in the dream. When my grandma died, and we had to clear out the house, I went upstairs for the first time. The upstairs was exactly how I dreamed it was. Green wallpaper with several doors in a long ass hallway. I was fucking creeped out. Fast forward to last year, I decide to tell my dad about the dream I had. I told him about the demon, and how I foresaw how the upstairs looked. Then he said, funny you mentioned that. I had a very disturbing experience upstairs one night when I was visiting mom in my 30s. He slept in one of the rooms up there and said a grotesque demon with a twisted skull face slowly poked its head out from the foot of the bed. My dad said he rebuked it in the name of Jesus. Dad's family is very Pentecostal, I'm not. Then the demon said I just wanted to make sure, and slid its heads back down making no noise, and no indication that it's gone. My dad had never told anyone about that experience before. I have one that was kinda spooky. Be me, 11ish, over at my friend's house, playing COD upstairs. His mother and sister go to the shop to buy food for dinner. House completely empty, we just play. Hear noise downstairs. Oh shit, point peg, mute the TV. After a few minutes of being quiet, we hear footsteps coming up the stairs. Not light steps, like heavy boots. Both of us are terrified. Stay dead silent, looking at each other. After a minute, we go to investigate. I lead as I'm bigger, holding a hurley, wooden stick for hurling. Look out. Go downstairs. Absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. Go back to the room. About to start playing. Hear the footsteps going down the stairs, and eventually disappear. We just look at each other, confused. Go back to playing. We still talk about it to this day, after 10 years. Craziest thing I've ever experienced. Few experiences. Not all of them are ghost of aliens or spoopy. Just not really normal. One of the ones that still fucks, that I'm fairly sure the drugs I used to do caused. Partied Harry night before, standard Friday night for me.